All right. So welcome, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Amy Ferrer. I'm the Executive Director of the American Philosophical Association. Thanks so much for being here and being a part of our APA Live event today, which is titled Diversity Institutes 101, Organizing an Institute. This has been organized as part of the APA's ongoing Mellon Foundation funded initiatives around supporting diversity institutes. And so now I'll turn things over to our facilitator for today, the APA's Program Assistant for Mellon Programs, Lucy Santerre. Lucy.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Today, we are going to be talking all about the ins and outs of running and potentially starting up summer diversity institutes for identities that are usually or historically, underrepresented in the field of philosophy. So we have some very talented and knowledgeable panelists on today who have a variety of experience in running, facilitating, structuring, and starting various institutes. And so please welcome Maureen Eckert, Julian Rome, Mercedes Diaz, and Dana Francisco Miranda. And so I want to add as well that folks are welcome to put questions directly in the chat. If you don't want to do a general question, you can send me a question directly, and I will ask it in front of the group on your behalf. You can also probably raise your hand. We're a small group here, and so if you want to speak up, you can share. And finally, we have about an hour for this webinar, and so we have plenty of time to go into detail if we have some specific questions. Before we get into specific questions, I would really like to hear from each of our panelists about their experiences. So we'll go in order of who's on my screen here, and I would love for everyone to hear about which institute you're affiliated with, how you got started, whether you were the one who founded it, whether you joined after it had started, and then just tell us a little bit about if your program is specific to a certain group of students, if it's a more general diversity institute, and if there's any other notable things that you would like to share before we get into the details about running it. So Maureen, would you please start us off?
Hi, happy to see everyone, and thank you so much for organizing this. I can speak first to the organization. I founded Pixie Logic. So it did not start out as having any affiliation with Pixie. It was a dream in, was it 2015, that I could try to create a diversity institute that focused on a specific area of philosophy I felt was really needing inclusiveness and diversity. So I focused on logic and formal philosophy. And I have to give an incredible shout out and eternal thanks to the APA for the diversity and inclusiveness grant. So that, to me, is if you're interested in starting out a diversity program, that would be exactly where to start. And I can speak to like that specific experience because people in the humanities very rarely apply for grants. So that kind of there's a rite of passage in terms of grant writing and creating the budget that got me into a whole part of my own institution that I never there's a whole department of professionals who deal with grants, but they're usually dealing with the sciences and social sciences. So that's something, if people have questions about, or that was a major part of the experience for me. And in founding and starting out the diversity program I did, the first year was a very, very, I can't believe we survived, but we did. And then things got better. So what happened was Brandon Feidelson of Northeastern University joined forces with me, and we moved the diversity program to Northeastern. And there was a change in how we did funding, because the diversity grant from the APA is a startup grant, and then you have to sort of do this on your own. And through the cycles of summer programs, we've been thrilled to see how many of the students that even from 2016, 2018, have now become colleagues. They're literally people who have already gotten doctorates or are well along their way in graduate school. So, all of the struggle is extremely valuable. And I can answer questions about how, changes in funding can be very significant, some strategies for that. And also just, figuring out your curriculum and the structure of the program itself. So, how to, we have a process where we attach graduate students as mentors. So we're sort of trying to not just bring in, sort of top star faculty to talk about the subjects that they do research in, but to bring in graduate students as well, and the undergraduates students to sort of create a community with multiple levels of experience and support. So it's been a great ride, and I'm happy to help people, figure out how to arrange the financing and the structuring, which it's a worthwhile struggle though.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I think you definitely touched on some important things that we'll want to dive into, so I appreciate it. And I just wanted to point out your interesting note around, the popularity of grants and grant writing in STEM fields, and just share a fun fact, which is that a lot of the programs that the APA does related to supporting diversity institutes, including things just like this webinar, are coming from a grant that Amy applied to several years ago, right around the same time, from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. And so even as, an association, we invested in the time for a grant, and that has allowed us to do programs like this. So the payoff is very real in terms of how that network reaches out into communities of young students. So thank you. And Julian, I'd love to hear from you now.
Hey, yeah, I'm glad to be here. So I'm Julian. I'm at the University of Michigan. I'm a graduate student, and I've been one of the organizers for Michigan's Compass workshop for the past 3 years. And before that, I was one of the graduate student mentors there. Compass existed at Michigan before I got there. It started out being affiliated with MAP, and that's where the funding came from, and now it's departmentally funded, I think primarily, if not entirely. The program brings about 12 students from various universities. Compass is committed to admitting at least one student who's international every year to the program. We're trying to kind of situate ourselves among a lot of other diversity institutes, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do. It's just a weekend long, and it happens in the fall, so it's on a slightly different time schedule than a lot of the other diversity institutes as well. That helps because it's entirely organized by graduate students. So that means that the bulk of our organizing happens over the summer when we're not teaching or working on classes or anything. And then it happens normally in October or September. Of course, this is at the University of Michigan, so we have to have it during a away game football weekend. So it turns out a lot of the scheduling stuff might be kind of specific to that. But yeah, the students come, they attend 3 seminars that graduate students run, so sort of discussion sessions. They're meant to sort of mimic what a graduate seminar would be like, to kind of show the participants what that's like. They're paired with a graduate student mentor who they meet with once or twice. And then there's a couple kind of panels and things like that. Like I said, it's run by graduate students. So especially if people have questions about how that works, I'm happy to talk about that. And then we have staff members who kind of provide continuity, since there is a high amount of turnover among the organizers every 4 or 5 years or so. Yeah, I think that's kind of some of the main points about it. But yeah, happy to talk about any parts of organizing Compass at all. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Julian. And it's really great to have a representative from the Compass programs, because that is important to note that though a large number of these programs do happen in the summer and they're a little bit longer, there are different options for students based on needs and interests and availability, and that having a fall program is very valuable. And now I would love to hear from Mercedes Diaz. Hi, Mercedes. I'm not sure if you're able to unmute, but we can't hear you yet. You should be unmuted now, it looks like. Let's see if we can hear you.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Great, we
At
can hear
first
you.
it wasn't working. Yeah, I feel like an air traffic controller with this thing on. So I'm Mercedes Diaz, and I'm over at Rutgers University. And I am the coordinator for our Summer Institute in Diversity, which happened to be actually the first one that ever existed, thanks to a former colleague, Howard McGarry. So I was not here for the inception, but I did come on around 2000, and then I winded up becoming more and more involved as years have passed by. So ours does happen during the summer. Usually it's in July. It's a week long. And it's usually easier then because, we have more time and space for everything. This is catered towards undergraduate students. And as Maureen was saying, we also have found that a lot of our undergraduate participants have gone on to go to grad school, and we've had them come back to be grad student panelists and mentors, and even more so when they become faculty members, we've asked them to come back as faculty members too. So students then can see kind of like, okay, you've been a grad student, now you're a faculty member. So, and always when we reach out, like they are so happy to say, yes, I definitely can do it. Or if they can't do it that year, they'll tell me, oh, I can do it next year. I'm marking it off of my calendar if you have the dates. So, it's been a great experience working on this. And, we always try to have the students like keep in contact with us to let us know, yes, I am planning to go to grad school. This is where I'm going. Or I'll get an email like this past year, a very sweet email I got from one student thanking me about the experience and telling me where he got in. So I'm hoping that maybe this coming year I'll have him back as a grad panelist. But yeah, any questions on how to organize it, the budgets? I recently dabbled with grant writing, so that's been a new experience. But any questions on that and how to find like facilities for it, I'm more than happy to help out and answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. Very helpful and good to know that we have some, people who can talk about grant writing, multiple people. So very good. Dana Miranda, would you please share your insights on the institute that you're affiliated with?
Yeah, so I'm primarily here for one institution, but I'm just going to talk about a different experience that actually led me to Pixie first. So I'm the co-director of Pixie Boston at the moment. This is my first year of a 3-year term. Before being involved with Pixie Boston, though, I actually started off with organizing with the Caribbean Philosophical Association in their summer school. So in 2015, I became the Secretary of Graduate Outreach, and part of that process was helping actually develop the first summer school. So again, interest in the Caribbean philosophy, global self-to-self dialogues was really a focus, but it was geared towards undergraduates, graduate students, junior professors. And so just having that experience of like organizing on the ground, like making sure like dormitories are booked, making sure food, making sure people are getting there, driving to the airport in Hartford at 2 a.m. to pick someone up because their plane was delayed. I think prepared me so well to finally say like, okay, if you're going to be part of organizing of a summer institute or just any actual institute, whether in philosophy or diversity, what are the on the ground hiccups that always happen that you should always expect, you wish against, but it's also part of the joy of organizing. And so with Pixie Boston, I actually first became involved with the organization in 2016 as a teaching fellow. And then I was invited back to be a speaker last year. And then I applied to be the co-director. So it's been a long history ever since 2016 of saying like, there's something so valuable of engaging with representation, engaging with philosophy in an inclusive key. But again, the diversity of philosophy and the practitioners of it, I find that so valuable. And now as a co-director, it's like, now you're on the other side of like, how do you get speakers? How do you get teaching fellows? How do you make sure you stay organized to make sure that you have everything done and completed by the first day, and then you just wait for the first hiccup, and then you just go from there. And I think developing a great team and how to do that is something I'd love to talk more about, because like I'm a co-director, but there's another faculty director, there are 2 grad directors. Julian was one of our teaching fellows this year. So like I said, I'm representing Pixie Boston at the moment, but in no way is it a single person job. And I want to really talk about like building a strong team really helps with organizing, really helps keep the institution along. And now with Pixie Boston, which was primarily Mellon Foundation and APA funded, but now it's funded through universities, and that changes the dynamics, changes how much we can do, and we have to be more careful about money. Just talking about that transition point is also something I think is very important. So like, yes, get those grants. Mercedes can tell you more about grants, but also how do you prepare for when those grants end? Because all these institutions are so valuable. We only have 20 slots a year, and there's so, like, if we just had more funding for 30, 50, or if there's just more programming, it would be so invaluable. So again, I'm so happy to be here. I'm very thankful. I'm happy to have all these conversations moving forward. But I'll just leave that there so we can like talk more about the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dana. And that is all really valuable. And I've written down a few things that we'll definitely come back to. And as a reminder to those who are attending, please don't be shy. If you have very, very specific questions, if you have, broad questions, just where to get started, please chime in. You can raise your hand or enter in the chat. But I think let's go back to some of what Dana was just talking about. I'd love to hear from some of our panelists about that, basically like the organizational structure of the Institute. So let's get right into that. Maybe for each of your institutes, how are you structured? Who is, accountable at the top of the Institute, whether it's the director or the grad student director? And then what types of roles are involved? And let's just start listing them and maybe give some descriptions of those roles for the institute that you're aware of or that you're involved in specifically, but we can also talk about examples of what you've heard other institutes have. So Dana, how about we start with you regarding the Pixie program that you're the current director of?
Yeah, so if you're talking about Pixie Boston, at the very top, you have a board of directors. They have prominent members in the Boston community and philosophy, people that like organize, like Sally Hasinger, who like helped create the program and helps keep it supported. But we also have past co-directors as part of that board to make sure like we're on track in terms of funding. Like they're really the ones that make sure like push MIT and Harvard to like keep this funding alive and check back to make sure like our institutional priorities and values are always aligned each year. So the board of directors are at the very top. Underneath that, you have the faculty co-directors, and we each have a 3-year term. And so they can be aligned. Sometimes they're uneven. But the faculty co-directors work to get graduate directors. And with that team of 4, then we actually put up a call to get teaching fellows. And so those teaching fellows run a seminar and help with a year-long mentorship for our undergraduate fellows, but they're also heavily involved in like choosing those undergraduate fellows, helping along with input and programming and helping on the day-to-day operations. So that's why I really wanted to shout out Julian. Like, teaching fellow like does not describe everything Julian did and all the wonderful things. So like that team of 8 is really in charge of like putting together a program for the undergraduate Elaine Locke Fellows. So with that said, we still heavily rely on MIT staff for the day-to-day operations of the programming. So they help with budgeting, providing stipends, making sure people like have housing, making sure things are printed, like booking rooms. So I think if I could do a quick rundown, like that's the team. Board of directors, we have the board of directors, the 4 directors, 4 teaching fellows, MIT staff. Like, that's what makes Pixie run.
That's fantastic and useful information. Thank you, Dana. I'm wondering if we could hear from Mercedes, noting that Rutgers is technically the first summer undergraduate diversity institute. Maybe we could hear a little bit about, you know, the history of how that's been run and what the structure looks like today.
Yes, sure. So I know when Howard was running it, we actually did it from a Sunday to a Sunday. Now we've kind of done it where it's Sunday and they leave Saturday, so we're off by one day. It's been running since 1997, so it's been a long time. But as I said, like, I've become more involved with it. Like, at first I was just handling like, oh, the applications and you know, letting the students know that they've been selected. Now it's been, you know, I'm actually more involved with coordinating like the space that we're holding it. We hold hours at our university and in conference center every year. So for us, since I have like kind of I know the person who handles it at our inn, so she's very good that she emails me like as soon as ours is done, like literally a week after it's done. She's like, "Oh, do you have the dates for next year? I'll reserve it right now." So it's been really great that it's been the same person working there. So I already like, so I'll ask our director, who now is Derek Darby, like I'll say, okay, you know, what are the dates? He'll give me the dates. I'll contact her and say, okay, these are the dates that we're looking at. Let me know if it's available. If it is, I lock it in. I'll get a contract. We usually pick between 16 to maybe 18 students. So, you know, I'll book rooms accordingly that way. And then kind of like do an estimate for faculty. I can always change it later, but at least this way we have that set. Most of our meals are there at the inn already, so I can change things later because I'm the one who then, once we've Darby and another faculty member chooses the students, I will ask them like who has a food allergy, are there dietary restrictions? I'll ask the faculty speakers that he has chosen and let me know like, do any of you have dietary restrictions or food allergies? This way I can take it into account and be like, okay, we need to have this type of food. If we're going to go out to a restaurant, usually the last day, I'll find something in the area, make a reservation to make sure that everyone is covered, you know, with that type of food. Does this space have like AV equipment? Do you need someplace that's accessible to all? A couple of years ago, we had well, actually 2 different instances. We had a student who needed an ASL translator. So I worked with our disabilities office, found somebody to work with that. So that's something you also have to take into consideration when you're selecting your student participants. As far as budgetary goes, we work with our SAS Dean's office. And usually we try to make sure in advance, like letting our chair know. I work with our business manager saying, okay, you know, this is how much we spent last year. We're kind of thinking we're going to most likely maybe spend the same ballpark amount. So we'll work with them to ensure that we have that money coming from them. I know that as I said, I did some grant writing to ask. There was something that came out from our diversity and inclusion office. So they had something. So I wrote something up, a proposal to get that. So we got some extra money for that. That only was for a year though, not more than that. So it's one of those things where if you want it again, you have to apply for it again. But yeah, the director is involved with picking the faculty. I actually am the one who picks the grad students. So I usually will pick some from our department, but again, as I said, I'll reach out to people who have been former undergraduate participants before who I know are in grad school, and I'll find out because I figure they already have experienced the undergraduate section. So they can not only talk about that, but also talk about their grad experience. And, there's a handling of the stipends, there's a handling of the travel. And Dana, you just reminded me of something funny where I now give out my cell phone number because I say, in case there's an emergency, which some years ago there was. Everyone knows we have a grad student who helps drive and pick up people. So I always tell people, look, you have my number. You have the grad student who's going to pick you up. If there's an issue where there's a cancellation or for some reason you got to the wrong gate and you missed so-and-so, this is what you need to do. Contact us, let us know. There is public transportation nearby if need be, how much it is. We'll reimburse you if need be. And they have the information of the inn, they have the number. So there's all this contact information. So that way, if something happens, which, something will sometimes, the emergencies come up, but at least, they know who to contact, and it's not a problem. And this way, no one is, everybody can rest assured that they'll be taken care of. They don't have to freak out, everything will work out, and it does.
Wow, thank you so much, Mercedes. That was chock full of incredibly useful information. So thank you. Of course, all of those accommodations are, very valuable details to take into consideration. And I think you really covered a lot there, from lodging to food and the situation at the Rutgers program. And then you also explained a lot about your specific role in coordinating pieces of the Institute, and it just demonstrates how this isn't something that any one person can do. It's always a team effort. I would love to hear from Maureen and Julian as well. And so before hearing from Maureen, I know you were involved in starting your institute, and that'll be interesting to hear about. Julian, I'm interested to hear about your role as director at one institute and a teaching fellow at another, and how you kind of compare those different pieces of involvement there. If you want to go ahead, Julian.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so, there are really different experiences. I guess first I'll kind of describe so the organizational structure of Compass, and then I can say a bit about how my experiences differed. And for Compass, it's just the department that runs it. So at the end of the day, it's our department chair who kind of approves changes, right? And really the chief administrator for our department is our budget point person. So she's the one that we kind of check with every year at the beginning when we start planning. We want to pick dates, when we want to check out, compare hotel costs, think about flight costs for different students as we work through the acceptances and so on. And then our graduate coordinator is our other staff member who helps. He's the one who kind of books the hotels. We use a travel agency to book our participants' travel, so we're not reimbursing our participants for anything. We're paying for all of that up front. The way it goes is they fly into the Detroit airport, and then they take a bus that goes from the airport to downtown Ann Arbor. And then we get graduate students to volunteer to meet them at the transit center and walk the 10 minutes to campus, and then get them settled in. And they stay at a hotel that's right off campus, so it's all really central there. And then we've had a few people come by train, and then similarly it's like a 10-minute walk. So it kind of helps things go smoothly there. The organizational team is 4 graduate students. I think it's been run with 3 before, but I've learned that we really need four of us to run it. So currently it's me and 3 other graduate students. Normally it's, we try to aim for like one person who's kind of the lead organizer. So this has been the role that I've had the past 2 years. And then we kind of have another organizer who's going to be the next lead organizer when I step down. This fall is going to be my last fall organizing Compass. And then 2 graduate students who are maybe newer to it. This is like an ideal, and then we are closer or further from it, kind of depending. As for the organizing team, what we do, we ask faculty members in our department to be panelists or give talks. We don't bring in any, for budget reasons, we don't bring in faculty from other universities. We just have faculty at Michigan who participate with us. We ask graduate students to be mentors, so we create a form that they fill out, and we try to match graduate students with the undergrad participants based on their preferences, kind of what they're looking for mentorship in. And then, you know, we kind of get grad students to help volunteer with other things like greeting the participants at the bus stop and things like that. And then, of course, there's a ton of kind of on the ground stuff that we just need to be ready for, like, you know, all kinds of emergencies, right? Or people's flights getting delayed or things like that. Or like the restaurant, like missed our reservation or something, you know, all these sorts of things. Yeah, I mean, so it's been really different, right? Doing Compass in this way from being one of the teaching fellows at Pixie. I mean, partially just because Pixie is such a longer program. Compass is a long weekend, right? And Pixie is a full week in the summer. And so even Compass being a long weekend, it's just a little different, right? Because you're not there all week, all day or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, it was just, it's really great to have done both of them. With Compass, my involvement has been a lot more administrative. So getting to be more involved, like teaching the grad seminar with Pixie was really great. I've run the discussion sessions at Compass before, but even those are a little different because normally they're kind of structured around like a reading group. It kind of runs that way more than like a class that's kind of being taught. That's another sort of difference. And then I think too, you know, bringing in faculty members from other schools like Pixie does was really interesting because I felt that myself and the other teaching fellows were also kind of getting a lot out of like meeting new people and things like that. Whereas at Compass, it was more like, okay, well, we have these relationships with these faculty members we're bringing in already. And so the focus was a lot more just like, you know, well, how do we bring in this faculty member and connect them with these particular students that we've gotten to know over the course of this weekend. So it's really different experiences. But yeah, both really great. I think if I was, you know, talking to a particular undergrad who was deciding about what program they might want to attend, I think that like knowing these differences would be really kind of interesting and thinking about what they might get out of the program and things like that, and the different strengths of the different programs. So yeah, it's just something like I'm happy to talk more about, but those are kind of the basic points.
Thanks so much, Julian. That's a really helpful compare and contrast. And you touched on an important point too, which is that communicating the differences in these programs is very helpful to the students so they know that they're getting into a program that's a good fit for them. Not to mention how this all mirrors the support for graduate school applications often. And I know that's an important part of the experience. We also got a really great question in the chat. So Maureen, maybe we'll ask you this first while you talk about the structure. And the question is, it sounds like graduate students are an integral part of these institutes. So a statement to start. Would you all recommend only having an institute if you have graduate students who can help carry the load? Maureen, would you like to dive in here? Maybe start talking about your structure and then also
interesting.
Yeah, and then also go ahead.
Yeah. So when I started at UMass Dartmouth, it was only me for everything from, you know, booking to dealing with every office in the university for housing, for food. And I discovered that there were teams that were ready to go and completely professional, but not some others. So there was no transportation. I had to actually rent vans to get to Logan Airport to get the students down to UMass Dartmouth, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere. I took on an assistant director about a week before we started because I was losing my mind. And that was Professor Kiata Fields. He moved on to Pixie Boston. So we both had a trial by fire. In terms of, I had a board and it was, just me dealing with all of the logistics, and we survived. What we had was a main faculty member at UMass Dartmouth at the time was an extraordinary logician, so he was our main faculty. We had visiting faculty members for each day of the week. It's a week-long program, and the idea was that the faculty member would do review sessions and then to prepare students for the talk. And then I basically called on we don't have graduate students at UMass Dartmouth in philosophy, but I just called on the network and brought in people from, and graduate students were absolutely willing to come in. And the idea, because our focus is so specific on logic, I was able to sort of put into our charter that a lot of times skill gaps were exactly like how do students fall off the map? And it's sort of when, in a process when students don't feel that they've mastered some kind of skill like natural deduction, or they don't know something, they back away from subject areas. So the idea was to provide not just sort of an introduction to different areas of logic and different problems in logic, but to just go over the basics and have graduate student tutorials that could be one-on-one or small group, so that any student coming in who didn't understand something left understanding it. So we had a very, having that focus on logic and formal philosophy gave us a way into sort of student to, even on our applications, we ask what kinds of skills they would love to get, what topics they feel weak in and would love to learn more about, and what topics they're interested in. So we can kind of give graduate students a very direct role in terms of building very specific skills that students come in like saying, oh, I want to know more about modal logic. So not only do we have maybe a speaker talk about that, but we have a skill set to, sort of tutorial, and that can really give students confidence that they come in and get their questions and skill gaps filled and move on to advanced study, because a lot of times that's what's kind of in the way. So when I moved to have Brandon come in and we moved to Northwestern, the structure was entirely different then. So from there, the funding changed because we were being funded directly by Northwestern with a small, maybe $6,000 grant from the Mark Sanders Foundation. So we were able to really change how the institution can help us. So it became a very, very sort of, so we're sort of been to the rodeo now. So we have forums that we ask all kinds of, questions about dietary needs and any other thing. So when students are accepted, we start to get as much information as possible to prepare. And then we keep the facilities informed about that. Northwestern is just, basically is phenomenal. What Brandon did that is very important for as an idea for people out there is he attached the funding for the continuous funding for Pixie Logic to his like contract at Northwestern. So it was like he was just like, I have this privilege of, negotiating, and he just went for it. I don't know if every faculty member could do something like that, but I wish there were more of them that sort of, he at a high level, you renegotiate your salary with a job offer, and, instead of getting a higher salary, he funded Pixie Logic. And I think, that move was very crucial, but it's very, it's harder to do. It's probably easier said than done. But what that opened up for us was a way to sort of just focus on the curriculum and inviting, faculty to come in to, to basically, do 2 sessions a day and have a graduate student, kind of the same idea from my original idea. We have the same kind of general call for graduate students in the area, and also from our own, now that enough students have come through, now our own Pixie Logic graduates come in as graduate students, and we're almost there at the bringing them in as faculty.
That's amazing, Maureen, and I think you're demonstrating exactly how building of that network and having a lot of hands to support in all different levels of involvement is really key to making these programs a success. And even if you survive in those early days with fewer resources, it sounds like more support the better. So
as Mercedes and Dana have pointed out, there's these very specific logistic things that come up, and Kyoto came in because as the date for the first our first our go day when the students arrived, as it approached, it was just one fire after another, and I couldn't someone had to put out the fires, and then someone had to greet the students. So it really it takes a while to build a team, but now we have staff at Northwestern who have been dealing with the logistics over time. So everything gets smoother when your team knows what to do, and that includes the staff at the university. So we have some wonderful, just the department assistant, and then Brandon gets a special assistant from Northwestern just for dealing with all of the logistics. And we can basically then, as a team, sort of divide up. We give out our cell phone numbers. That's absolutely necessary. And it turns out to be wonderful group chats that have gone, like every time there's an APA, that group chat reactivates from all of the old Pixies, and they're like, who's here? Is anyone here? So it's not a bad thing to create like a WhatsApp group chat or something, because year after year, the same students are looking for us and looking for each other at every single big conference. So it's phenomenal.
That's amazing, Maureen. I think we want to save some time to discuss some financial elements. And so, Dana, you made a note earlier about the transition from grant support to more institutional support. And I think there's some valuable information in hearing about that transition. Would you be willing to share a little bit about the funding support for your program and how you got that structured? Maybe what was the pitch to the different institutions? What role might board members or directors have played? And thank you again, Maureen, for all of that info too.
Thank you. So in terms of like the fortunate position I have as a co-director, is that it's really the board of directors that put the financial pressure to really keep the funding going. So as part of the board myself, as soon as you become a co-director, you're also like part of the board of directors as well. But I'd say Sally Hasinger and the board have done a good job of saying, like, really planning ahead of time, because I became the co-director with the transition already happening. So with the Mellon funding and APA funding ending, Sally did a wonderful job of like pressuring MIT to say, like, will you keep up this funding? And they've been working with Harvard to do a memorandum of understanding to, again, keep the funding going as well. And we're still working on that. So there are still ongoing discussions to say, like, okay, for this year, we had enough funding to keep the programming the same. So we had the same number of co-directors, faculty, graduate directors, TFs. We could still support 20 students. We could still do the number of social activities that make the event more about networking as well. So fortunately, again, we still had the funds, but I was still told throughout the year that we have funds for this year. For this upcoming year, it's going to be a renewed talk with the board of directors saying, okay, was that memorandum signed? Has Harvard provided enough funds for us to keep it the same? Should we cut down on social activities? Should it only be 15 students? So even right now, it's in a state of limbo because our program just ended. Like, it really just ended, like, I think 4 weeks ago. And so we're starting up by saying, like, before I reach out to speakers for next year, before I book anything, what's our finances actually look like? And I still haven't had that conversation yet with the board, but I think it's very helpful to know whether it's a board of directors, whether it's your department chair or your department that's funding things. If you don't have a constant stream of money, you're probably going to be dealing with an annual basis of, like, what funds do I actually have? Like, Pixie has been blessed, like a lot of the Pixie programs, to have like such great funding. But now a lot of us are on our own trying to figure that out. Fortunately, like, MIT has been very supportive and saying, like, there's something very valuable. Sally has been a great fighter for the program. But I think part of the question before about, like, graduate student involvement is also integral, because if you're thinking about the future of an institution, even if you only have faculty members now who really want a program, go for it. Like, we always need more programming, especially around diversity and philosophy. Like, we need as many programs as possible. But I think it's helpful to note, like, if you're thinking about a future of a program, the reason why many of us have grad student involvement is because they are the future of our discipline in these programs. Like, eventually, I can't run this anymore. It's a 3-year term. I'm not able to be a co-director. So having the future prepared people like Julian, like, already involved, already knows the in and outs, like, maybe Julian will be invited to be a speaker one day. And then after being a speaker, director. Yes, so I think it's just helpful that when you're looking at these institutions and really thinking about funding, you're like, especially maybe Maureen can speak more of this, you're usually worried about, like, that first year, like, surviving it. And then if it goes well, how do I keep it going? So I think just being really honest about, like, this is an annual thing. Like, unless you get these grants, unless you're funded by the universities and have something set in stone, a contract, funding is always going to be a worry. And the reason why, like, I still worry about funding every year is because I'm like, this is something so valuable, it deserves to be funded. But again, this is my first year as a co-director. Maybe Mercedes has even more knowledge about this.
Thanks, Dana. And yeah, Mercedes, do you have any insights into securing funding or keeping that funding going for a program with sustainability in the long term in mind?
So yeah, I mean, I know that as I mentioned, Howard McGarry was the one who started, and he actually had applied for a grant. And he was very instrumental in, you know, continually always meeting with, like, people from our main, like, dean's office that handled the budgetary stuff. So he made it a priority to always meet with them. And I remember that I'm still doing this, like, I would do, like, a little spreadsheet indicating all the expenses that we had, like, okay, we paid this much for honorarium, we spent this much on travel, because like everyone else, we do the travel up front, unless it's something where it's like, oh, someone's coming from like New York or you know, where they're taking like the train at the subway. So that's something that unfortunately we can't pay up front, so we would have to reimburse. So we take all of this, have it out, so we have a total and saying, okay, this is what we spent, this is what we expect, you know, a roundabout amount of money. Last year was our first time where, now during the pandemic, obviously we didn't have travel, we still did it, so it was online, so all those expenses weren't used. So now it's just more or less just going to our deans and now trying to see if between the deans and applying for grants to kind of combine it if we have the extra. Another thing I was going to note that I didn't mention before is that we also have designated like a speaker from the Aesthetic Society that comes, and that society, they actually pay for the honorarium and they will reimburse us expenses too. And we now have another organization that also is doing that. So that's something where we're also getting some extra money that way. Now, I don't know if that's something that other organizations would want to do. Like maybe you have something from, you know, like Maureen, you have the Logic Science, and maybe there's the Philosophy of Science Association. Maybe they have something, you know, designated where they might be able to provide some funding for a speaker, you know, so that would kind of take some of the costs of. You know, and with Julian and Dana, maybe there's something where, you know, if you're looking for a specific, like you have a topic that's being covered, you know, through your program, you know, whether it's, you know, ethics or philosophy of race, there possibly would be like an association that maybe can provide some additional funding on top of, you know, what you're getting from your university already. You know, we've lucked out that we have these two extra organizations that now, you know, are giving us some extra money. So that kind of takes off some of the costs that we've spent on travel, meals, you know, hotel for the speakers, and they pay the honorarium up front. So we're not paying for that. So maybe for both of you and other people, you know, thinking of future programs, that's something that you might consider also. Especially if you have faculty in your departments who maybe are members of these associations, they have, you know, a leg up where they know people in those areas, so they'd be able to, you know, discuss it further. Just to remark again about grad students, yes, the grad students are very important. I can say if there's been a situation where if I can't physically be there to kind of like cover things, like I had a personal thing that happened a year ago, you know, with family, and I had to be at the hospital, so I couldn't be there. And the grad students that were on the panel and served as mentors, they were so great, covered like sessions that they were having with the students, took over everything. So I was so grateful to have those grad students there helping out. So if you can have some grad students, you know, around, whether it's ones because you have a graduate program at your university, or if someone, a faculty member, knows students from maybe a nearby school, I would definitely have at least some, because they are a valuable resource. You know, they're closer in age with some of the students, so there's kind of like that thing, like, oh, like kind of like a bigger brother sister kind of thing. And they can speak so much about what they went through, you know, applying to school, what their current experience is. And having students, if it is a program where you're looking more at diversity in the discipline, it is so key to have that kind of like, I have someone who looks like me who now is at the stage. Because I can say I've had several students who have said, oh, I'm at this school, I didn't even know that some of these programs existed, I didn't even know there were this many grad students, or in some cases faculty that have come to speak. Like it really made an impact on them, and I know that they appreciate that. So it is so key to have, you know, those mentors there.
Thank you, Mercedes. That was again, chock full of very useful information. So thank you. Especially noting what you said around pooling of resources regarding different sources of funding, such as honorariums and using associations for support. You know, there's definitely a case to be made for compensating, you know, all of those involved and being able to find ways to make up for that, even if it's, you know, thinking outside of the box is very valuable. So we're nearing the end of our webinar here, but I do want to give everyone a chance in a sentence or two to share any additional tips or things. And then I also wanted to note too that Julian, we didn't hear you on this last question. So if you wanted to just take a moment to respond regarding either finances or graduate student support, I'll let you go first and then share your concluding thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, there's really less I can say about the finances since I think a lot of that is kind of handled departmentally. So I'll just kind of like set that aside because I think everyone's really covered the main points that I would have thought about bringing up. Yeah, and as for the graduate students, like I can imagine a version of Compass that's run primarily by faculty. It's just knowing like how much time it takes to run it as a graduate student. I couldn't imagine one faculty member trying to run Compass alone, for example. Even with kind of staff support. And I think that like having graduate students involved in a mentoring capacity is really important. It's something that I see pretty much all of these institutes have some version of. And I would say that like if graduate students are only involved in a small way, that would be like the main way that I would think is most important to have them be involved. Because that sort of mentoring about the application process that they very recently gone through is something that faculty members can't really approximate on their own. But yeah, in terms of some more general takeaways, I would just like encourage people to look into organizing these sorts of programs. I kind of wanted to attend and talk about Compass in particular, partially because Dana's talking about Pixie, so he can cover that, but also just because Compass is a smaller program that is, you know, there are fewer students, it's a shorter time, it's during the academic year. And so I think that like other programs like this, if you don't have the resources for a full week in the summer that brings in a lot of external speakers, there are ways to do a really great job organizing an institute in a smaller scale. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Julian. Really appreciate it. Dana, do you have any concluding thoughts, any key takeaways you'd like to share?
Yeah, just like to echo Julian about there's such a dire need and want for these institutions. Like everyone who's here is involved in some way and seeing the value of it, but just be more open to having conversations and pushing people. Because at Pixie Boston this year, I tried to push a speaker to create Pixie West. I was like, come on, like Seattle, Washington, like California, like there's a space and there's enough institutions there and philosophers there that they could create this program. So just seed ideas in people. Yes, it's hard work. There's always difficulties, but there's so much joy involved in these programs that just spread those seeds.
Thank you. That's awesome. What a great idea, Pixie West. Maureen, do you have a concluding thought?
I guess the thing that has been, excuse me, so really important is just, you know, remembering that funding the students for their time is critical. So if you're taking students' time, they have to get a stipend that's substantial, at least a week's worth of pay, in addition to the travel expenses and food covered, food, like we have literally had to we've set aside stipends for them, and you know, and had to even rethink like how much that was, because students that we want to come are the very students that need that are often working multiple jobs or have family and responsibilities. So the lion's share of our funding really is funneled towards students, with like visiting faculty last. It's like, if you could get your department or university to cover it, we really have learned to focus on supporting the students, because for them, this odyssey to come to a diversity institute is extremely, it's like it's bananas. It's so huge for them, but there's many obstacles for them that can be unseen, or don't make assumptions about how free students are to just pick up and come somewhere else. Like that's been a bubble that really burst, and it was very good for us to understand that time and time again.
Thank you, Maureen.
Other
That's really
than that,
helpful.
it's worthwhile.
That's really critical information to share, and I really appreciate that you added that. Mercedes, is there any concluding thought that you would like to share?
All else, I think everybody's said so much already, but just to agree with everyone. Yeah, I mean, funding the students is definitely high priority. And I feel like having this program and being with it is like giving another opportunity of community for the students who maybe they don't have that from whatever school they're going to, especially if they're coming from small colleges, which a lot of them sometimes are. They're not coming from big name. So this is an opportunity for them to not only have a community of diverse people, and even people who may be like them but are not at their school, but time for mentorship, time to, they make friends with these other students that they meet there. So and I know because I hear back from often many of them. So I mean, offering community, and just keep doing what you're doing with the programs, because it's wonderful to hear that all of this is happening, and I know that they appreciate it a great deal.
Thanks so much, Mercedes, and great to conclude on a note about community. And it's just, one of the best things that you hear about people's experiences coming from these institutes is the community and network and the mentorship that sticks with them. So thank you all so much for sharing all of your insights today. I also just wanted to share Amy, thank you, Amy, for sharing the slide up here. There's a couple of resources here, including the email addresses of our panelists today. But one thing that I would like to note too is that last week we held a webinar as part of this 2-webinar series, which was all about the student perspective. So if anyone who's watching this is also interested in introducing these programs to their students, that's a really great resource. Students can understand what it feels like to attend, to make friends, to do practice seminars, to travel to a place they've never been before. We had 4 attendees, 3 of which had recently attended, so they had lots of things to share about their experience, and that's a great thing to share forward with your students, whether they attend your institute or another one. And then just again, thank you to everyone for taking the time today to be here. And as a reminder, this resource will be saved on the APA website, and it will be alongside other resources. And so those links are on here, or you can go to the resources and drop down to Diversity Institutes or Diversity Institute resources for more information. And that's all we have today.
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for being here. And this came up a couple of times during conversation, but of course this is part of the APA's work through the Mellon Foundation grant that we received, which is wrapping up. So like all the institutes, we're hoping for additional, to locate additional resources to continue supporting diversity institutes. So if you'd like to see more of this kind of programming, I hope you'll consider supporting the APA Live event series and our Diversity Institute work with your APA membership, with a donation, and suggest topics for future events. The link for that is on your screen as well, as is the link for APA On Demand, where you'll find the recording for this event and all of our other events, including the one last week. This one will be up within just a couple of days. So thanks again, everyone, for being a part of this. Really appreciate all your insights, and we look forward to seeing you at a future APA Live event. Take care, everybody. Thanks again.